Okay, thank you very much for tuning in. So this is a notice of intent to litigate. So we're going to talk about this. It's fairly lengthy, so do bear with me, but it's a very important subject matter here, so we'll get started on it right away. So the introduction of it is basically, the Canadian law, and which is why I left the country. As you can see here, I'm not in Canada. There's palm trees and everything. Where am I? I'm not in Canada. Why? Because the law doesn't agree with medical science. What do you mean the law doesn't agree with medical science? That's preposterous. It is preposterous. It absolutely is preposterous. Why doesn't the law agree with medical science? I mean, that's just it should be. The medical science says this. The law says that medical science is just not wrong. It's just that they don't agree with it. Well, that's nonsense, right? This is what the topic of today's video is all about. So, um, so basically, the unjust loss of life. All right, the unjust loss of life is what's going on here. So the intent to commence litigation. Right. So. Am I really intending to do it? Well, there's no point in a Canadian court system because of this very very incorrect the flaw in the law and the justice system itself is that they don't agree with medical science. Right? How can the law not agree with medical science? Well, very simply is because of bribes. Politicians get bribed by the industry executives and all that stuff, and basically, yeah, they don't agree with medical science. What kind of nonsense is that, right? I know I just said an earful, but so what's going on? The unjust loss of life. So we got people dying here. And the Canadian court system has got their hands tied behind their backs. Why? Because the industry executives, pharmaceutical executives, right, bribe the politicians, right? It's so simple to understand, but that's a broad overview of this whole thing. So we're going to get into the details here. So a notice of action, right, in the Supreme Court. Definitely, it will be dismissed, right? Definitely, the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia will dismiss this case, and then after that, it's going to be the appeal, and then will the Supreme Court of Canada actually hear this case? Chances are low. So, is there a real recourse here? Well, the answer is, slim, but the truth is the truth, and there's no denying the truth. Medical science is very, very clear. All right, so declaratory relief. Declaratory relief is. I'm not trying to get a. There were some ideas of a criminal thing because so somebody's killing these people, right? There's a criminal case here. There's somebody's certainly responsible, right? Legally culpable for these crimes, right? So declaratory relief. Well, that's one thing. There was some talk of a class action where people that are the victims could. Claim any kind of, but no, it's not going to happen. What is the only, if there is any kind of a remedy in the court, is would be a declaratory relief, right? So criminal charges, right? The perpetrator is going to stay in their big brick mansion for there's not they will never see a day in the prison, but they certainly belong in the prison for the rest for a period of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years, right? Who are you talking about here? We're talking about Dr. Michel Dell, which is a family physician, and if you know anything about me, this person is an actual member of my family, right? And my family, I'm so incredibly ashamed. I'm so incredibly ashamed by this subject matter. My family did a tremendous disservice. Disservice is an insult to the idea, right? It's not a disservice. It's a crime. It's a serious crime. The greatest crime ever, right? You can Pol Pot, whatever kind of dictator you want to bring up to the table, whatever, any of this, the genocide of Rwanda or something. It's not even it pales in comparison to what's actually happening here. Who is the killer? My a member of my family, right? So it's extremely burdensome to me. It was such a nuisance, right? This person is extremely creating an extreme nuisance and actually killed my child, right? So this is the personal connection. There's two personal connections. So number one is the actual fact that you know we share the same type of grandfather or whatever. My grandfather died in the war. It was honorable, right? He died, fighting for his country or whatever that means. That's a whole other story. But he died in an honorable manner, right? So he died as a soldier fighting for his country. I don't know, as a war hero, honorable kind of guy. We share the same grandfather, literally. And now this Dr. Michel Dow is we share the same grandfather, literally, right? And Dr. Michel Dow is responsible for doing what? Let's talk about that. So basically, the what is this? this thing. Okay, so it did not disclose the information, right? That prescribing the drug will cause a death in the embryonic life, which is the baby, which is a small baby boy, baby girl, right? So the embryo, of course, has been conceived because these birth control pills will. Whoa, you're talking about birth control pills cause abortion? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, because that's what happens, right? So the birth control pills don't actually prevent ovulation. It does not prevent the conception. A small boy or small girl is conceived and killed at the later and very natural stage of implantation. Implantation is not the starting of a pregnancy, as the college of gynecologists suggests. It's complete nonsense, right? Embryology is clear, and there's no denying. But here's a problem here: is that there is a life, right? So the life, right? And this is for my child that has died, right? And this whole idea is that my child is certainly recognized. You know, All right, so the Canadian law doesn't recognize my son, even though he was like a Canadian citizen and all this stuff. I don't have any faith in the justice system, and certainly don't have any faith in Canada anymore at all. Especially not in the whole idea of Canada as a slave to the British Crown, taking over l'Acadie, which was our nation. And what are the consequences of this? Is that it only works if basically the women are completely ignorant, or brainwashed, if you will, to kill their own children, right? To kill their own children is actually what's going on here. Now this child's name was René Julien. So there was an actual child there. There was an actual baby. The baby was conceived and alive. Oh yeah, but a baby, the Canadian law allows for the death, the homicide of a child. Up to 40 weeks. Well, okay, because the law doesn't agree with medical science. I mean, there's no justification for that kind of nonsense, and it certainly will. See, the problem is natural fertility is not a disease. Natural fertility is a woman's natural ability to have a baby. It's not a disease. It's not an illness that needs medical correction. So what are you writing a prescription for anyways, right? The use of hormonal birth control with known post-fertilization effects can contribute to, certainly can contribute to the act of ending a human life. And that's certainly what happens. So the baby is conceived. There's a new set of DNA there. There's 100% baby boy or 100% baby girl. So, the baby boy is very, very, the thing is, it's the most precious, most valuable resource on the earth. There's no greater resource, no gold or oil or, whatever you want to try to suggest is more valuable than the embryo. Right? This is the most important and valuable asset that the world has ever known. So the failure to obtain informed consent on such a matter is unethical and contrary to professional medical obligations. So the doctor, you don't want to call her that. I mean, she breaks her oath of Hippocratic oath, every single day, basically. So, what kind of doctor does that? Well, it's not really a doctor now, is it? So, well, basically, you're supposed to say, okay, look, there's 100% chance that you will, or what should I say? I should say the chance is not 100% sure. Is not 100% that you will not conceive the baby. There will be a baby there, but unfortunately, the baby will be killed later, right? So if you take these birth control pills, right? So that's what girls do, because they're like 15, 16, 17 years old, literally 15 years old on birth control pills. What kind of nonsense is that, right? Keep your knickers on. Yeah, keep your knickers on until marriage, right? At the the wedding, right, dress. The wedding dress that's the act of when the husband removes the wedding dress and then consummates the marriage, right? That's the whole point of it. That's the whole point of a marriage, right? And then a child is born in wedlock, right? So yeah, well, you had children outside of wedlock. Yeah, I know, and it was a terrible situation. I love my children very much, but the whole situation there was ridiculous. I love my children very, very much, and my son is very infinitely valuable. Right? This is a very, very wonderful gift that was bestowed upon us, but we did it wrong. Yeah. So again, let's go back to that woman in the doctor's office, or the girl. Let's just call it what it is. It's a young girl. Right? She's not even of they're minor-aged children. They're minor-aged children. They are minor-aged girls, right? Literally not old enough to vote or drink or smoke, right, or whatever. So the doctors are taking advantage of this. Ignorance, right? So the doctor knows that the ovulation can still occur and the baby can still be a baby, right? There's a baby. Yeah, there's a baby. Yeah, yeah. And you want to call it a blastocyst? You want to call it a fetus? You want to call it an embryo? Well, it's a baby, right? It's a baby, 100% a baby. So then the doctor takes advantage of that ignorance, yeah, and then gets the woman to pay for the killing of her own child, right? So it's a money thing, right? So actually the dad pays for, the dad of this girl. I don't want my daughter to get pregnant and all this stuff. Well, then you could do a better job as a dad, and teach your daughter to keep her knickers on. Yeah, but our society and all this stuff. This is why our society and all that stuff. This is why our society is like the way it is, right? So try to find any young lady over there that's a chaste virgin. Try it. Try. It just will not happen. It just will not happen. So men, right, have to go with some sort of used car salesman, right, kind of idea, if we want to get married at all. And that society thing. I don't really care about the societal issues that we have, but certainly it's challenging for a young man to find a chaste virgin for a wife. Like we should. Chaste virgin for a wife is the desire of a young man, right? We don't want to have a town bicycle for a wife, right? It's not something that is desirable for us as a man, right? And of course, rightly so, right? Rightly so. So the problem is, right? The problem is that the court is actually disagreeing with medical science. We'll get into that. So, the declaratory relief. I mean, is it really important? No, because we already know medical science knows the truth. So, should the law be, should the law have its hands tied and say, oh well, we all, it is a fact of medical science, but the politicians told us that, basically the legislative assembly there. They said, well, now we can just basically so for example, the baby, you can kill the baby at week 40, and then the baby's born, and then if you kill that same baby, you will be, indicted, right? It makes absolutely no sense. Canadian law is there's a flaw. There's obviously a flaw. I mean, there's a serious flaw, right? And to point that out is reasonable and necessary, and I would be foolish not to point out this. So the problem is that this person was prescribed hormonal birth control by Dr. Michel Dell, and that's the problem, right? And unbeknownst to this person, had the potential, right? That there was a trickery, a deception, right? The potential to prevent the implantation of a fertilized embryo, right? So let's read that again. The potential to prevent the implantation of a fertilized embryo, right? So I'm going to read that one more time. This drug has the potential to prevent the implantation of a fertilized embryo. So number one, conception happens. There's no... They even admit, right? Everybody knows this, but they just choose to ignore, or they just choose to be ignorant. And everybody actually knows this. And the people that don't know this, well, they're the customers, right? They thrive on this ignorance, right? They thrive on the ignorance. So then the child, right? This was a termination of a human life, and suffered profound emotional and moral loss as a result, right? So there is a tangible loss, right? There's serious wrongdoing here. I get into a little bit more of the details. So this video is just a broad overview. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next video. I'll talk a little bit more about this here. I will do that right now. Thanks for tuning in.